All right, so let's work with a little bit more with manual mode, especially in tricky lighting situations. So this is what my camera is reading as correct exposure. If I was actually taking a picture of this skull, it would be pretty dark. So it says it's correct exposure. Why is that? Because if we kind of look at the scene a little bit more, you see the skull, and I have really, really bright lights coming on behind it. So what my camera is doing, ironic thing is my phone is actually correcting it and making it perfect on the screen. So what this screen actually looks like is this. My camera looks like that, even though my phone has corrected it. But let's say now, if I want to take a picture of this skull, I can change my shutter speed. See how that's making it brighter? I can change my aperture, obviously. I can change my ISO. But what you want to kind of think about, see that? We can make whatever adjustments. But the problem is that because of the light behind it, it's going to be hard to get a reading of it. So you have two choices. One, if you have a zoom, what you can do is zoom in on your actual subject. So if I'm trying to take a picture of this, now I can go and try to find the correct exposure. I might want to go a little bit overexposed on this because I want to be able to see the skull. So maybe that's the correct exposure. So then when I zoom back out, this is a little bit closer to what I'm seeing on my camera screen, right about there. So basically, when you have a really tricky lighting situation, you have to decide what's more important, the background or the subject. First of all, I probably should change my spot. I should probably take this photo from a different angle, maybe using the light from the windows on the side, and that would be a lot better. But right now, if this is what I have to work with, then the skull is more important. So if I was taking a picture of the skull, see how I'm zooming in a little bit and kind of getting rid of the light behind it, it helped me actually figure out what's the correct exposure. So sometimes when you look at your exposure meter right here, sometimes you have to override that and use your common sense a little bit. See what you see on screen. So right now, this is what it's saying is correct exposure. And that's pretty good. Right now, I'm on a tripod. My shutter speed is a 15th of a second. So if I take that picture, listen in. Did you hear that? It was a long shutter, okay? So if I was hand holding, what do I have to do? I'm gonna put my shutter up. If I was hand holding, I would wanna go, around 100th of a second. That's way too dark. So now I need to open up my aperture. This camera, the widest aperture I can do right now is 4. It's still underexposed. So what's the last option I'm gonna do? Now I can move my ISO up. Let's start with 1 stop. And that's not bad. It's slightly underexposed on there, but I can take the picture and I'm at 100th of a second now. So if I was hand holding, I'd be able to do that without any shutter, without any shake. As we're working with manual mode, you have to take into consideration where is the light coming from, what is your exposure meter telling you, but then you also have to think through things. So right now, I'm at a 4 for my aperture, so I'm gonna get some blur behind it, which is what I want. So you have to match up what do you want in the photo to your settings, and you have to work with what you have. So right now, this is the lowest aperture I can do. I could change my shutter to 100 by changing the ISO, and 400 is not too bad. We'll move on to the next thing. Okay, so I moved the skull, and now you can see, because the lights are off, the blinds are down, there's only one source of light coming in, so I can take this photo without that bright background now, right? So if you look at my exposure meter, it shows I'm underexposed. So what do I want to change to get it a little bit brighter? I have options, obviously. To get it brighter, I can I can make my ISO lower, but remember, that's my last option. I only want to do that, you know, if I have to. If that's my last resort, I'll change my ISO. But right now, I can either slow down my shutter speed. Right now, I'm on a tripod. I'm not holding it, so I can go to this shutter if I want to. But now it brightened this up. So maybe I want to underexpose. Once again, you use your exposure meter, but you ultimately are making the choice of what you're seeing, right? So right now, the other thing I could do is I can change my aperture. Do I want more of the background in focus? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But in terms of brightening it, I can't go any farther than 1/4. Once again, if you were hand holding this, you should aim for like 1/100. This is all I can do. So my choice is to take the photo underexposed. I can brighten it up and adjust it a little bit in Lightroom, right? My last resort is if I need to bump this up, I can bump it up to 800. But because this is such a white object, the skull, and the background is so dark, there's such a big difference between the front and the back that my camera is still kind of struggling to figure out the correct balance. So one thing that I can do, I'm gonna off-center this. I zoomed in. Remember this, right? Okay, remember that right there. I zoomed in. I'm on live view so that you guys can kind of see what's going on. This is the live view button right now. Maybe we should stop. If you haven't played around with that, that's for video, but it also shows you what you're shooting on the back here. So I'm zooming way in on that detail so you can see it's really kind of blown out right here. Really too bright. So now I can decide I don't want my ISO that high. I'm gonna leave it at 400. And maybe I want it slightly underexposed because this is what it's saying is perfect exposure. It's too blown out. So I'm gonna intentionally underexpose. So when I go backwards, what I'm seeing on my camera screen is a little bit more like this. So use your exposure meter the best way you can. So right now, we actually got a good balance between everything right there. And so I could take the photo. But I want to off-center it. Okay, did you notice what happened when I off-centered it? When I moved it here, there's this little bit of light. When I moved it here, the background got darker. So all of a sudden now, I'm a little bit more underexposed again. So even a little bit of light in your background can really make a big difference in how your camera reads this. All right, hopefully that helped. We'll move on.